Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our after-school session for families. Tonight, we're going to talk about how to navigate the new normal. I'm Dr. Alka Kohler, Chief Population Health and Clinical Officer for Inspira, and I'm here with my esteemed panelists who I'd like to introduce. We have Miss Amy Mansu, who is our President and CEO. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you, Dr. Kohler. I appreciate it. I'm so honored to be with you this evening and to bring greetings from all of Inspira Health. We treasure our partnership with you, and I really hope that you will find this information helpful and actually be able to apply it, maybe even this evening. That's part of what we do, is partner with you where you are and try to provide our experts to your home, to whether you come to the hospital or home, we're right there with you. So I thank you, Dr. Kohler, and I'm excited to be part of this presentation.
Thank you, Amy. Next, we have Mr. David Moore, who is the Executive Director for Behavioral Health Services at Inspira.
And certainly it is such an honor to be here with this panel and to be helping the very community that I've lived in my whole life here in South Jersey. And I have been the Executive Director of the Behavioral Health Service Line since 2006. It has consistently expanded over the years in direct response to the needs of the community. And rest assured, we continue to expand this year as we recognize that the behavioral health needs of our community are growing as the stress in our environment grows. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Joseph OBrien, who is our expert social worker for tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Kohler. I've been with Inspira for almost 10 years as a clinical social worker. Currently, I am the supervisor of clinical services in Bridgeton for partial care, intensive outpatient, and behavioral wellness center, which is our traditional outpatient. And like everybody has already said, I too am very honored to be here with this panel, and I look forward to helping folks come up with strategies to deal with these unprecedented times.
Thank you, Joe. COVID-19 has indeed been taking a toll on families everywhere. Amy, why don't you start us off with talking about why we are here tonight and how we can help?
Yeah. You know, Dr. Kohler, you mentioned it. This pandemic has changed everything, literally everything that we do. From the moment we wake up, we have an entirely different routine, and tonight is really about trying to figure out how to just get through this period of time and not just slide through, but really thrive through. This is an example of what Inspira has done for the last 30 years in our behavioral health program. We've responded. We've been there with you. We've grown our program, as Dave has mentioned, and the reality is that we've really stretched to make sure that we had everything that you could possibly need. And I want you to know the passion that our staff have for the work that they do is also matched by their tremendous skill. And we wanted to bring that live to you tonight to have the opportunity to share with you some techniques, but also to be able to answer questions at the end of this. I want you to know that through the behavioral health program, we provide both inpatient as well as outpatient services for children. And we actually created a program for children ages 3 to 5. We call it our nursery program because we saw the kids were having very disruptive behaviors, and we knew that we needed to step forward and provide that. And I'm thrilled to tell you that because of this pandemic, we actually have significantly expanded our telemedicine services. So even if you can't get in for services on the outpatient basis, you could use telemedicine services anytime you need. And those are just examples of how we've been there and stood by you and look forward to continuing that work with you. And we want to make sure that you know that resources are available for both your children as well as yourself. You know, as we started to think about tonight's presentation, we thought that it was really important to talk about things that we never thought we would be facing. And remote learning is one of those things. You know, it's hard enough trying to learn how to work from home, let alone how to teach your children and really try and manage all of those stressors that come with it, let alone continue to be a mom and a dad. And so tonight comes from really listening to you and listening to, candidly, some of the things I've heard in the neighborhood, worrying about whether it's week 1 or week 2 or what the schedule is or whether or not I'm going to school on Tuesday and Wednesday or who's picking up the kids and all of those things. Well, at the same time, many of you have spouses that are both trying to work remotely. So you're calling on people for help. You're having to ask for help, which are things that we don't necessarily like to do generally. And all of that creates tension, creates the opportunity for short patience, as well as just stress on what is already a very stressful time. So tonight you're going to have very practical tools to be able to help get through that period of time, and hopefully you'll allow Inspira to continue to partner with you in whatever way you need us to be there. And Dr. Kohler, I really am excited about moving to the next part of this equation, because it really is going to be about the tools we all need to learn to really take advantage of this. Not just the children, not just children and their parents, but all of us can learn from these tools.
Thank you, Amy. So all of these points can feel very overwhelming, but I'm sure they're ringing true for those families that are listening out there. And Joe, I'd like you to elaborate a little bit further on the challenges that Amy has mentioned and how we can combat them.
Sure. Amy listed many of the practical challenges facing families right now with remote learning. If we go just beneath the surface of those practical challenges, oftentimes what we find are a sense of being a burden, a sense of inadequacy, a sense of guilt, sense of failure, whether it's not being an expert in some subject matter your kids are studying, or not being able to get them out and connect them with friends like in pre-COVID times. Finances become an issue. If folks aren't working in the home, if folks have lost jobs in the home, how do we do the things we normally would do? So I think that underneath these practical challenges, there's a, raging river of emotions. And these are the types of things that, again, on the behavioral health end, we're equipped to deal with. Not just help folks come up with these practical solutions, which is obviously very important, and we spend lots of time brainstorming in sessions, but also just processing and just bearing witness to how difficult these things are and how intense some of those emotions can be. We have, folks have been called to do things that they've never been called to do. And so it may bring up a whole bunch of feelings that you've never felt. Like I say to folks every day, you went from being the expert, either at work, at home, both, and now we're amateurs because we are, out there without a paddle, without a sail, just floating, trying to figure out which way land is. So I want to make sure we honor both the practical challenges and also the emotional ones.
So the only thing that's constant is change, and that's not a new statement. We live in a world where change is common. We change as we grow older. We're faced with changes every day. But certainly 2020 brought a lot of changes, and no one denies that, and fears and unknowns. So let's talk about change for a minute. It certainly can be debilitating. It can be overwhelming. It can cause you to freeze up. It can cause you to avoid the people you love. It can create self-doubt and fear, as Joe was talking. So we have to accept change. Actually, we have to embrace change. Now, we're dealing with change, and we're all pretty much sure this is all temporary, and sometime we'll get back to a new normal. But never sell short the fact that change is opportunity. It's opportunity to grow. It's not just growing because your child knows more or has learned something. It's personal growth. It's family growth. It's growth within the relationships. And it's a time that you can embrace your whole life. That as you go through and get back to that new normal, you might look back at this as your greatest year together. So embrace the opportunity, embrace your children every chance you get, and we'll all get through this together.
So, one of the main models of therapy that we use is called acceptance and commitment therapy. These are the 6 main tenets of acceptance and commitment therapy, and I just want to talk about them briefly because I think this approach to issues in our everyday life is very applicable right now. And I won't touch on all of them, but I want to hit some of the main points. First one is we use the word acceptance a lot, but we've gotten away from that a little bit, and a lot of times we use the word expansion. And expansion is a tool that helps us basically, metaphorically, expand our borders, our personal borders, to actually hold more experiences, more parts of ourselves. So instead of just trying to be insular and take all the bad stuff, all the difficult things that we really can't avoid, and try to avoid them, we try to expand ourselves. We try to expand what we're able to actually hold, both the beautiful things that are still going on in our lives and the very difficult ones that obviously we can't avoid. So working on expansion can be very, very important in a time like this because we're all being asked to hold on to a whole bunch of things that we didn't sign up for. Diffusion. Fusion is when we get stuck with our thoughts and we just assume that any thought that comes across my brain is reality. If I think it, it must be the case. If I think I'm inadequate, I must be. But clearly, that's not the case. Can we make mistakes? Of course. Can we do things and reconsider them later? Of course. But oftentimes, I have these very judgmental feelings or thoughts about myself that aren't reality. And so diffusion helps us separate from our thinking and see it as thinking, as a natural reaction to some experience. And so we want to make sure that as folks deal with the changes related to COVID, that we avoid catastrophizing, that we try to recognize that just because my thought says this is a catastrophe and says, I can't do this, this is terrible, doesn't actually necessarily mean that it is. As Dave has pointed out, most of the time these are opportunities for growth. And I know that's hard to hear because these are really difficult things we're dealing with. At the same time, while they are difficult, they are opportunities to grow. The only way we can do that is by anchoring ourselves in the present moment, because this is the only place we have power. I don't have any power yesterday, and I don't have any power tomorrow. I have power right now to choose what I have the ability to choose. And so oftentimes we're called in times like this to reevaluate our values, to circle the wagons and say, wait, what is important to me right now, given these circumstances? And then take committed action that honors those values, that helps orient the ship. Can I see land? I don't know, but I have a direction. I'm going someplace because I've identified my values and I'm taking committed action right now. Those are things we can do right now, today. Those are not things that have to wait. Those are not things that come with time. Those are things we can start to do now. So if we can start to embrace some of those principles, oftentimes, folks report that they feel more flexible, better able to deal with change.
So strategy for managing overwhelming feelings, particularly concerning acting as a teacher when you're a parent. You don't have that training. So as you work through this with the school, identify a primary way to manage communication with the schools. It's really best if you have a contact person, someone that you can go to when you need to. And explore everything that's available to you. Explore resources available within your own child's school for academic support. They're going to need academic support. And most importantly, though, these last 2 areas, to aim for balance. This may be a challenge, but it's something to strive for. It's something that's easy for me to say, but this is an everyday challenge for you. You have to have boundaries of your time. You may want to actually set a schedule for your commitments. a lot of you's work, and now you're supporting your child who's in a virtual learning environment. And you still have all the other things you need to do, and that really takes a balance. And most importantly, and I really have to strive on this, to be forgiving towards yourself, your child, your loved ones, yes, your teacher who is doing something new now too. Everyone is adjusting, and I have to stress how important it is to be engaging and kind to your child. You know, I'm a parent, I'm a grandparent, and I'm actually a great-grandparent. And it took 3 generations for me to recognize one of my own mistakes in parents. I gave the speech, I remember. How could you do this? How could you let me down? All the things I do, how hard I work. And yet, when I heard my daughter give it or a grandchild give it, it just doesn't, I realized that the children are at a different developmental level than the parent who's the adult in the room. So hold on to that. Remember, you're more experienced in relationships. You may not know calculus or geometry or even U.S. history, but you do know how to love your child. And your happiness is really linked to your child forever. You can't escape it. And so remember that their developmental stage is at a lower level than you, and they will let you down. And it's really your job to be the parent, the adult in the room, and embrace them at every opportunity.
To build on that, I think that, again, you're going to hear it plenty of times. You've probably heard it many times before tonight, that because these are unprecedented times, we might have to try things that we've never tried. We may have to implement structure where none exists. When kids, I know there's some sports being played, but my house was run by my son's sports schedules or, you know, the kids' schooling and things like that. It was like clockwork, or my wife's schedule, my schedule. Now, things have changed. And so sometimes we have to implement that structure. We have to provide it because it's not just inherently built into our lives. And in order to do that, getting the buy-in of your kids, even if they're young. As Dave said, we're always the adults in the room, and at the same time, we might want to make sure that their voices are heard. Think about it. None of us probably feel great due to the things that have been imposed upon us by, you know, the universe, by a pandemic, by the social distancing and things like that that have come with it. So we know what that feels like, to have something imposed on us. Imagine being a child and having one more thing imposed on us. Trying to get their buy-in, make sure their voices are heard in that decision-making process may go a long way. And also being really novel and really creative and trying to figure out an incentive program. It doesn't have to cost anything. It can be for experiences. But nevertheless, trying to figure out something that's age appropriate for your child that would help motivate them. And you may never have really needed that in the past, but again, these are times where we might have to just get outside of what we used to do and start to figure out what we're going to do in order to continue to thrive. Because if we were able to do it before, I'm certain we can all do it now. It's just obviously going to take a little more flexibility and maybe a little more creativity.
So this is a rather funny slide, and it takes light of maybe one of the most important points of this presentation. And that's really, as a parent, and actually in my career as a nurse, we really take care of others, and we're pretty good at that. As a race, as a human being, we're great at taking care of others. We can see you, we can give you advice. Lord knows we've gotten plenty of advice from our own parents, and we didn't always receive it well. But this slide talks about how important it is for you to take care of yourself, because you can't help all those other people if you don't. And yet, we do have a tendency to run ourselves ragged. We keep hours and don't take breaks, and especially when it comes to your children, oh no, we'll do anything. But if we don't remember to take care of ourselves, it affects our ability to be the best parent or person that we could be. And your family and your loved ones and all of us together, we really do need each other these days. We might be isolating from each other and keeping a distance, but that doesn't mean we don't need each other. So in that schedule of yours, make sure you take care of yourself. Keep yourself fit. Look out after your diet. And really schedule that time for you and your spouse, because you really do have to keep that balance. I can't underestimate it. And it starts with taking care of yourself.
Self-care, as Dave said, is incredibly important, and it's something that, with every client I've ever worked with, it consumes a large part of our time. Taking breaks is incredibly important right now. With people working from home, I know I say this all the time, I've had my cell phone, my laptop. When we were working strictly from home for outpatient behavioral health, I felt like I was on the clock all the time. I was constantly fielding phone calls, emails, texts, all kinds of things. And I had to step back from that and realize that may not be in my best interest or in my colleagues' or my clients' best interest. So I had to impose on myself the ability to, or the schedule in which I had the ability to walk away from it, to take breaks, to set time aside to do other things. And I think that whether it's our professional work or helping our kids figure this out with their schoolwork, we can model that and help them figure that out. If they sit at a computer for 8 hours, I don't know any kids that could do that. I know mine can't. Maybe they can now because they're in college and that's kind of what they do. But most young kids probably can't do that. And even if they could, it's probably not good for them. So trying to help them figure out some sort of healthy schedule and balance so that they're not neglecting their work, but they don't feel like that's all they do. And again, that starts with us, making sure we do that with our work. If work consumes us, our little ones are absorbent. They soak all that in and go, man, okay, that's maybe what I should be doing. The other thing, too, is making sure we honor all the things in our lives that are working well. Maybe your family has grown in really positive ways during this time. I know there are plenty of things that I can point to, and maybe they've been hard won and we've had to work at them, but within my own family that have been positive changes that we've made since the pandemic hit. So being thankful for the things that are working well in our lives is really important. It helps us keep that psychological balance. It never allows me to become too lopsided. Obviously, if I ignore the fact that coronavirus is a thing, that also causes me to be lopsided. We want to try to keep a balance. So literally making gratitude lists, putting one on the fridge for the whole family to contribute something to every night or every week. Things like that can actually make a really big difference because it is a visual reminder of what is working well. Seek support. Nothing wrong with that, and obviously I'm a therapist, so of course I'm going to say it. There is nothing wrong with getting support, whether it's you contacting the school and saying, man, I can't really figure this out with my child, whether it's you asking for somebody to come be with the kids while you get out of the house, whether it's you seeking your own mental health services. You don't need to be diagnosed with depression or bipolar to come sit and talk to me, to get an intake and have a behavioral health appointment. There are lots of reasons people show up, and the stress related to the pandemic is certainly one of the reasons folks have been showing up recently. And I think a lot of people have gotten a lot of good work done. So we encourage folks to reach out. Even if you think, oh, no, I can't reach out because of this. It's not important enough or it's not severe enough. Everything is important in our world. If it's difficult for you and it's causing dysfunction, it's important. And be selfish. And honestly, it's not selfish. Putting yourself first sometimes is not selfish. Putting yourself first makes good sense. It makes absolutely good sense. You sitting here listening to us tonight is you being a good parent. This is one of the steps. You being here trying to wrap your brain around everything that's going on and trying to get some sort of outside perspective other than your own is being a good parent. It's taking care of yourself and obviously also taking care of your family. So again, two sides to that same coin. By taking care of myself, I'm automatically taking good care of my kids. I meditate twice a day, every day. And I always joke with people and my kids, the best thing I can do for myself is meditate. The best thing I can do for you is meditate. And so again, we can't separate our care of our families and our care of ourselves.
So when to get help and the symptoms to look for. And help can come in a lot of different ways. And so you really do have to start keep communicating with your loved ones. Don't isolate yourself. And you could get help from your family or from your minister, or you could call 1-800-INSPIRA. We have many locations. We have locations in Glassboro and Woodbury and Elmer and Bridgeton, the Behavioral Health Department, and we're here for you. So clearly, if you're feeling thoughts about self-harm or suicide, you should call a professional, get some help. And feelings of depression, anxiety, being withdrawn or isolate. When I worked the inpatient units, and people that became so decompensated that they required coming into an inpatient unit, and a lot of times the warning sign I used to see on those units was someone that would lose the ability to sleep. If you're not able to sleep more than 2 nights in a row, you really should get some help, because all of these things will start occurring in one way or another if you become so fatigued. Appetite, isolation, excessive worry, again, panic episodes. There's nothing more concerning when someone is so upset that they're really not in control of themselves anymore. You really need to get some help. Unhealthy coping. A lot of this, some of this is unhealthy coping, certainly some of the appetite things, but excessive alcohol use or other substance use, these dull the senses. They can be habit forming. This is not the time to decrease your competence. So really, these coping mechanisms should not be used if possible, and be very careful. Certainly with your alcohol. Risk-taking behaviors, anything that puts yourself or others at risk just for the sake of being at risk, it's another problem. So please, if you see this list and you need to look in the mirror, never hesitate to call 1-800-INSPIRA. I listed our locations, and as Amy mentioned, we have really upped our game with our virtual abilities. We can actually do an intake and recommend what level of care you might need. Maybe you just need to come in once a week. Maybe you need to come in 3 times this week. And there are your resource numbers.
So I'm confident that if anybody needs any of these resources, of course, 911, if it's an emergency, if you're having thoughts of hurting yourself or someone else and you don't think you're able to maintain safety, then of course 911 is the place to go. For anything other than that, you may want to look at the numbers on the screen and you may want to give us a call. I'm confident that we have availability ASAP. I know we employ darn near an army of therapists. Our services are expanding as we speak, and we can handle just about everything via telehealth. Many of our therapists, including myself, we've become certified in telehealth, and over the last 6-8 months, we've gotten very good at delivering our services via telehealth. If folks really want to come in face-to-face, we also can work with that as well. So, without sounding like too much of a salesman, sincerely, I really do think that if you have some sort of need, we probably have a program that could meet that need. So please, you can reach out at 1-800-INSPIRA or call the 575-4111 is our direct access line. It goes to Bridgeton, but can schedule any kind of appointment at any of the locations or refer you to where you need to go if it's behavioral health related. And what's not on there, and I know you've probably found the website already since you're with us, you can go to the Inspira website and you can request an appointment with online through an email, and it goes directly to my access staff in Bridgeton, and they'll field the email and they'll get right back to you and we'll figure it out. And this is the tuition assistance for childcare. It's obviously been something we've talked about with lots of clients, with staff, that folks are going back to work or kids aren't in school as much, and so childcare is an issue, and childcare is always an issue. It's always been expensive. And so through the state of New Jersey, there are some subsidies to help folks pay for childcare, and you can see some of the eligibility criteria and the websites listed there. So again, even if you think you may not qualify, it may be something that you look into because you never know.
And one of the other things that we wanted to talk a little bit about tonight is the COVID rapid testing that is available at our urgent care centers. This test is, you can literally just walk in, we can have the results within 15 minutes. We ask that you schedule an appointment just to make sure that we have availability of just getting you through that process. In some sites, we have room and you can just come in the facility, and others we're going to ask you to wait in the car. There is a process that we will go through to make sure that we're always focused on keeping you safe. And again, as Joe already indicated, the website will provide plenty of that information. And also I'd encourage you to download the My Inspira app. This app is very easy to use, and it'll navigate you through, and it can help not only through COVID, but the rest of the time in using Inspira. You know, I really am so grateful for all of the teams that have stepped up and provided all sorts of care. But there's one I need to remind you of that you know already. During this period of time, it's never, ever been more important than to have your flu shot. We know that the symptoms of COVID often look like the flu, and one of the ways that you can minimize your illness is if you go ahead and preventively go ahead and proactively get that flu shot, is what I meant to say. Please make sure you make time to do that for yourself, for others, and I'd also encourage you to make sure that your loved ones that are elderly, that you have spent that time to make sure they get their flu shot, whether you can take them to the pharmacy, take them to our urgent care. Our own pharmacies in our hospitals have it available as well, so you can swing by in Mullica Hill or in Vineland or in Elmer, and we'll make sure we make that available to you as well. So please take this time. As you heard tonight, making time for yourselves, making time for your loved ones is one of the things we're going to ask as a priority, because making sure you're healthy during this period of time will certainly help support your children.
So thank you to all of our panelists for an incredible amount of information this evening. I have to tell you that no matter how many times you do this, just sitting here listening to this and recognizing what we are all facing and this incredible time of stress, I think it really does take a village, and we are here to help you in any way you can. You've heard our panelists tonight, and what I'd like to do is thank them once again for sharing the wisdom and the help that they are offering. And what we'd like to do for the remainder of our session tonight is to take some questions from you, the audience. I didn't say this in the beginning, but there's a Q&A button on your screen that you can basically click on. And if you type in your question, it comes straight to me, and I have a computer right in front of me, and I'll be able to read those out and ask our panelists to help respond. So some of you actually did get this even before I spoke of it. And so we have a few questions that have already started to roll in. So in no particular order, I'm going to start to address them. If at the end of this session I run out of the opportunity to ask questions, We will have the answers to all of the questions, those that were answered tonight and others that might not have been, if you go to our Inspira website, which is ihn.org, and by tomorrow we should have that up and running. So let me get started with the questions that have been coming in tonight. Joe, I'll just throw this one out to you. I'm fortunate to be able to work from home on days my son has virtual learning. At times I feel guilty for the interruption to my workday, and to compensate, I find myself working late hours, which really only makes me feel more guilty about missing out on the additional family time. Any tips for breaking this constant cycle of guilt?
Good question. Great question, actually. And it's a variety of a question I think I've been asked lots of times recently. So I appreciate it, and I'm sure it's valuable for a lot of folks out there. Sure. One, two things we could do. We could make practical adjustments to our schedules. And I know that working from home, as I already stated, my kids are in college. They were working in their bedrooms virtually, for the last 6 months, and it was kind of weird. But obviously I didn't have 5-year-olds or 7-year-olds running around the house, and I can't lie, I'm not disappointed. But I do know that having young kids try to focus on schoolwork while I'm also trying to work, and then if I neglect my work, then having to do the work later when the kids are not in school and we can be doing other things as a family, it's a real catch-22. It's really, really difficult. Clearly, we can make practical adjustments to that schedule, but honestly, I think the most important thing to do is probably to deal directly with the guilt. Just because I haven't heard, whoever asked this question, I haven't heard a parent who's done anything wrong in this case. I heard a parent who is struggling and is caught between two things that he or she truly values, and I don't think there's a right answer or an easy solution to that. But I do think if we deal directly with the guilt, that may be really helpful. And to, again, expand. Hold on to all that at once and say, geez, I really want to do this and I want to do this. They're both very important, and in the end, I'm going to have to make a decision, and it's going to be a very difficult one. I think that's where many people are right now. So again, I know I can't deal with the answer as thoroughly as I'd like to, but honestly, I would say let's go right to that guilt and sit with that and realize that perhaps I really haven't done anything wrong.
Joe, can I also just add on to that as an employer? We here at Inspira have had to make changes and make adjustments to people's schedule, and also look at some of the workload that we've done, and having conversations directly with your employer and your supervisor to try and figure out, is some of this guilt self-imposed? I know that I am my worst critic in reference to trying to get things done and piling stuff on. And often it seems that when I'm in my sort of darkest moment of feeling guilty, I actually take more on. Because, as long as you're feeling bad, why not just go through it? And often it was been conversations directly with peers as well as with your supervisor to really get some understanding about, could this be missed a day? Could we change a deadline? Please don't miss those opportunities. Your employer understands that we're all going through these stressful times, and we're learning how to work remotely. And we're also learning to try and make sure that we are honoring that work-life balance. So please don't miss the opportunity to give them a chance to support you as well.
Very well said, Amy. And now here's a question actually that talks a little bit more about the work-related issues. Again, not everybody's working with Inspira, so there are folks having some difficulty with that. And this question comes out to ask if there's any help for parents who have to quarantine their child due to travel, but workplace is not letting them take off because it is travel-related. It's causing me so much stress that I could lose my job. Is there someone I can talk to, Dave?
So you could listen. We will always listen if you call the hotline. But beyond that, I just have to say that in the state of New Jersey, we do have the Family Leave Act, and it really is specific to this question. And in the state of New Jersey, you are allowed to take off for your children, in most cases. In all cases, in my area of employment. So I would say take advantage of that. Because if your child is really being quarantined, pretty sure you might want to be quarantined too at this point. So do what's right for your family. Always. And in this scenario, your child is being quarantined, a parent being at home may be the only answer. It's a difficult issue. It's a difficult area to get help. So I would say the right thing to do is if you need to be with your child during this time, you really do need to be with your child.
Good answer. I couldn't agree with you more. Joe, here's another question. What programs are available for preteens who are struggling with isolation because of COVID-19? It has been awful to watch my typically happy child, struggle with this.
I hear it. It's one of those kind of weird scenarios where kids don't have to go to school, and some kids obviously were like, all right, like this isn't so terrible. I get to stay home more often. But that's it's a boomerang sort of effect, and now we're realizing that what was social distancing and imposed because it was a safety issue has now become social isolation. So we've kind of seen in a lot of cases it transitions from, hey, this is just what we have to do right now to maintain safety, to it becomes more of a lifestyle where kids are depressed or sad or lethargic and locked up in their rooms on their devices or whatever. So it is really difficult. Couple options, at least right off the bat, that we have. Certainly talking to a therapist one-on-one is nice. It's socialization. It's another human being. But we also have, depending on the age of the kid, because I believe it with the virtual IOP in Bridgeton, I believe it starts at 13. But we have partial care, which usually necessitates a pretty severe level of care. Something pretty serious has to be going on. But our IOP, intensive outpatient, meets, I believe, 4 times a week, and all virtually, I believe starting 13 and up, and it's group-based. And so kids meet virtually with a couple other kids their age, and they get to kick around ideas and express their feelings and just kind of cope with whatever they're going through at this time. And I know, at least as of earlier this week, we had immediate availability in a program such as that. But obviously the socialization piece, I think, is now many people's focus, because we're realizing this may not go away as soon as we thought it would, and winter's coming, low light's coming, and so when you add in a habit of social isolation, I hear you. I mean, it is scary. So we have, some programs available right now to help kids get in a group setting and talk that out.
Dave, so Joe talks about 2 things here. One is social isolation, and the other is being attached to devices. And we have a question actually that's asking about this in terms of allowing kids to video chat with friends during this remote learning and isolation. And this parent is torn between being strict and also making them concentrate on their work as opposed to video chatting. The question the person brings up is, I try to remember that if they were in school, they would be socializing anyway, but it also makes me feel guilty when I'm not making them sit down and concentrate. Any thoughts or wisdom to help this parent?
I think you are certainly involved in their school, and there are certain requirements, and as long as they're meeting those requirements, if the work is getting done, then it's a happy day. And certainly you do want to embrace those opportunities for appropriate socialization. So yeah, you know what? Before COVID, I was sort of the old man, and I would look at grandkids or great grandkids staring at the phone a lot, and I'd be a little concerned. And I've gotten over that this year because it really is a form of safe socialization right now, and You know, so using that mode protects my family from the virus. So as much as it's new and it's different, and it's something that maybe I looked a little cross-eyed at just a couple years ago, it seemed like you were always looking at your phone, I've really gotten over it. So chatting with your kids online is a good thing, as long as, just like before the pandemic, as long as you're living up to your responsibilities and getting your work done.
Thank you, Dave. And I completely have to agree with you. I actually have a first-year college student who's at home, and if you have boys like I do, you know, one of the things you realize is that people talk to each other a little bit differently. And again, in this situation where they can't be with each other and they have to have the 6 feet distance and everything else, you know, it's really interesting how the ability to be on their devices or play a game and have side conversations, it actually helps them through this. And I couldn't agree with Dave more. You know, so long as the work's getting done and they're keeping up with that, there's a balance between being able to do that and letting them continue to have some sort of normalcy in their life. You know, on that note, there are several questions here that are asking about how to talk to your children about COVID and the fear and anxiety it brings. You know, as adults, this has created a lot of fear and anxiety amongst us anyway. But when it comes to little children or not so little children, what is the best way to do that? Joe?
Another really good question. Probably very frankly, honestly. Clearly, we want to speak to our kids in an age-appropriate manner, and the way I speak to a 17-year-old may be different than the way I speak to a 5-year-old. At the same time, if kids are really distressed about some of the things going on in the world, or some of the things that have affected them directly, the one thing we can always do, always, is ask. Be curious. Ask them how they're feeling. Ask lots of questions. Be genuinely curious about how your kids are doing and how they're feeling. I'm guilty of this because I'm such a school guy. I love learning. My kids, for years, first time I'd see them after work, I'd say, "Hey, how was school?" I wouldn't ask them, "How are you?" Something really simple like that. Just shifting it away from, it's not necessarily all about school, it's about you as a human being and how you're doing. How are you? How are you feeling? Asking your kids, what do they know about coronavirus? Because they may have, we're talking about the internet and being on devices. If somebody's on devices, they're probably at fingertip length. They have all these really wild ideas and conspiracy theories and things like that. So one, making sure our kids have good information, accurate information from reliable sources. Two, being curious, being open to hearing their feelings. I don't like when my kids are sad. I don't like when my kids are anxious, but I know I am the parent and I do have the ability to, again, expand myself and be able to hold that for them. I don't have to react. I don't have to fix it. I have to bear witness to it. And that's probably the most difficult thing I think any of us are called to do as parents, bear witness to the sadness or the anger or the anxiety that our kids are going through right now.
Thank you, Joe. And sometimes it does help to know that everybody's really feeling this. Interestingly, I have a comment really, from a teacher who remarks, "I'm a teacher and I don't like virtual teaching. I don't like to teach anymore, and it makes me so stressful." Any words of advice for those of our educators out there?
I mean, I can take this one just because I was a teacher for 10 years and a school administrator for part of that time. I hear you, really. I don't think I would want to be in your shoes right now. Heck, teaching in the classroom some days, was exacerbating. I can't imagine making this transition and doing it in such a short period of time. And obviously so many districts and so many situations were ill-prepared or not well thought out. And again, not to defend them, but I don't know how we can think this out that quickly. If you're really that dissatisfied and you're that distressed with your job, not to sound like a broken record, that's a completely legitimate reason. for making an intake and coming and talking to me, talking to, you know, one of the therapists on the team, and just making sure someone hears you. Again, you could go quit, but obviously you may not want to do that. You know, your family may be dependent on that. So again, it may be better to come in and hash all that out with a completely neutral party, come see a therapist and have your feelings validated. And obviously you can talk about, like, what do you do? Where do you go from here? But yes, I would assume that there's probably many teachers listening right now that are in the same boat. And again, that's a perfectly legitimate reason to come seek help and try to figure that out.
I think you're absolutely right about that, Joe. And this is difficult for teachers, for parents, for kids, and just everybody trying to balance this through. Here's another question as far as schools and communication. A lot of school communications have been last minute. Again, no surprise, as Joe says, these are not always easy things. This is not something educators have done, so things sort of spring up on you. The person writes, I'm a type A person who likes to plan things out. I hear you, so am I. So last minute changes are stressful for me. Any tips on reining in the stress or emotions of it all?
Listen, last minute changes, they can happen. I certainly, at the end of March, I never saw us transferring every one of our outpatients from in office to a virtual platform. It was a long week. It really just comes down to recognizing your limitations, and if you're put in an impossible situation, it is certainly within your prerogative to talk to your administrators and talk to your board. These are big changes, and it did happen on a dime, so it might not be anybody's fault. But obviously, we all need time to prepare. And then remember that no matter what you do today, you can always adjust for tomorrow and the next day. So virtual learning certainly wouldn't be perfect on day one or month one. It's another skill. The therapists didn't get to the point they are today in the virtual therapy. So stay with it, figure out what's not going well, network together. There's a lot of school districts out there, and if you network enough, I think you'll find something that'll work for you. Because I can tell you that the virtual experience does provide some upside opportunities as far as talking to those children right in their own house. We found that talking to consumers in their own house actually enriches the conversation. People are more comfortable in their own house many times. So look for the silver linings and network. And again, every day it can get a little better. Easy to say, hard to do, but it is the only path that I know. Thank you.
So we'll take one more question, and then we'll wrap it up. There's a lot of questions that have come in, and I thank everybody for those. And again, I'd like to remind you that if we didn't get to your question tonight, please look for those questions and answers in the coming days on ihn.org. But I'll finish with this last one because, again, these are the kinds of things that are close to all of our hearts as parents. My child is in college and now having mental health issues due to changes on the campus surrounding the COVID. What should I do to bring him home or allow him to stay on campus? The wellness center at his college is only online. Well, before I take it over to my experts, I can tell you as a mom, I don't know if this is a mom or a dad, listen to your gut. You know your kid the best, and make that decision based off of what your gut is telling you. That being said, I'll ask our experts to weigh in as well.
I have two kids right now in college, one at college, one at home, and they're both probably watching me as we speak. It's a tough one, and I definitely can relate. My son's campus is definitely on the rise with COVID. I don't love that. It makes me pretty nervous. And as any half-decent therapist will tell you, we never tell you what to do. We can't, we won't. But we certainly are here to, one, go straight for the feeling, that feeling of not knowing what to do, of uncertainty, of feeling stuck, of not wanting to make the wrong decision. And one, learning to hold on to that, to acknowledge it, to experience it. And then, obviously, you know, we can sort those things out. But it is a really difficult decision. And obviously, I'm guessing your child's an adult if they're in college. So that plays a part in it too, because he or she probably has some say in what happens. So I definitely empathize with your situation. And like I said, I can relate firsthand. I'm there now. But I certainly know sitting with my own anxiety and being able to give it what we call a relational home, being able to tell somebody and have somebody validate it and acknowledge it is probably what gets me through and what allows me to not make any rash decisions or impose anything on my son while he's away at college.
Could I just add to, you know, you really do have to make sure that you keep that two-way communication going for your own mental well-being and to express how you feel and all your hopes with your child. So there are a lot of ways to keep in touch with your child while they're away. And if you have concerns, you should. 2019, there were a lot of articles and data that showed that our college students were having more mental health issues. Some articles called it a pandemic. Well, we know what a pandemic is now for sure. And the pandemic of 2020 didn't help that pattern. So keep in touch with those young adults and make sure they're all right. Thank you.
And I absolutely agree with our panelists tonight. I'm going to leave you here with a comment that just rolled in, and I think it says it best. As a school counselor, I am so happy that Inspira has provided this outreach to parents. Helping students and their parents navigate school during COVID-19 has been a constant topic of conversation for us as counselors. Being flexible, adaptable, and kind to one another has made all the difference. We all need to support one another. And I thank the person for writing that comment in, because that's what it's all about. And at Inspira here, we are here to support you in any way that we can. Thank you and good night.